without truth.
I will only tell the truth. I will only tell the truth.
What's up, y'all? It's the Fireman here. It's Fire Friday again. And today is episode 5 of My Life, A Story of Redemption. If you haven't checked out the first 4 episodes, I encourage you to go back and do so. And if it's some value that you see there that touched you, or you know it'll touch somebody else's life, then please share it with somebody else. Last week, I talked about my big experience with trying to find out what God really was prompting me to do. And along the way, I found that he definitely for sure wanted me, as well as all of his children, to go out and be sharing the gospel with people. And so I shared a story about my first time doing that and how that went. And it was a scary time. And as I continued to do my time, I ended up getting a couple more life sentences. That was kind of a challenge in and of itself, but I just pushed on. I just persevered because I knew that the time that I had on earth, although I didn't know what that number was, like how long I would live, I know that eternity is much longer. And so I'm doing time, man. I'm picking them up and putting them down, doing calendars. You know, I'm like year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, just doing my time, working my job, sharing the gospels, doing Bible studies, playing tons of sports, winning championships, you know, and stuff like that. When all of a sudden one day I get a letter in the mail from a person who I don't know. And that was uncommon for me. And so I opened up the letter and I continued to read it. And it was from some lady that I didn't know. And she basically told me that there was a mutual friend we had in common and that he asked her if she had any pen pals that would write to me. And so she asked a few of her friends and they were all like, nah, you know, like, what do we look like writing some guy, some guy that's in prison. And so at the time, the company that they worked for went out of business. And so she, one day at home, looking through her things, she ran across my address and she decided, you know what, I'll write this guy. And so she wrote a letter. And that was the letter I had in my hands. And so it was an encouraging letter. It was a very friendly letter. It didn't really have any kind of godly or religious connotation to it. It was just kind of like, hey, your friend told me about you. I thought maybe you could use some cheering up or something. And so I think she might have put an article for the Cubs in there, which, like, if you were trying to uplift my spirits, like, you probably wouldn't want to put anything about the Cubs, especially during those days when they were pretty bad. But anyway, I thought it was a nice gesture. And so I decided to write back. And so I wrote back. And, you know, for me, I never had any desire to want to have any kind of relationships outside of prison. And I don't even mean just romantic relationships. I definitely didn't want any of those. But I didn't really want any friendships outside of prison. Now, family and maybe friends I had prior to coming to prison, I definitely would have stayed in contact with them. But man, it's tough. It's tough having relationships outside of prison, especially if they're romantic in nature, like a girlfriend, fiance, wife, and stuff like that. And I've seen so many people over the years, as my mother would come visit me, just basically have a really difficult time trying to have any kind of relationship on the outside. I kind of liken it to having one foot in the outside world and one foot in the inside world in prison. And you know, you really can't live like that. At least that's what I determined for myself. And I said, you know what? I can't get out right now. So I'm going to put both my feet on the inside world, which is prison. And that made it easier for me to be able to cope and deal with things because my mind and my focus was right in prison where I was at instead of my mind taking me somewhere else. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't daydream. Like, there was a time in prison when I was joking with a couple friends and they knew I was a huge Mariah Carey fan. Like, I loved Mariah Carey. I'm talking like for years, ever since I first saw her and really first heard her. And so I kind of had some friends challenge me like, hey, you know what? You should write her a letter. And I'm like, oh, wow, great idea. If I only had her address. And so, man, lo and behold, one day, person comes up to me like, here go her address. And then during that time, it kind of made me think, you know what? Maybe I ought to look into this. And so I actually went to the library and they actually had a book in the library that had addresses of like superstars and celebrities. And sure enough, an address was in there and it was different than the address I had. And so I started writing Mariah Carey. And actually, I would write two letters. Like instead of me typing it or photocopying it, I just thought handwritten had a special, touch to it. And so I would write the same letter twice and then I would send to each address. And I probably did that, man, maybe about a year and a half, something like that. And I had hopes and all kind of daydreams of like getting the letter back and like Mariah Carey coming in disguise in the visiting room. We sit there and we kicking it and having fun and stuff. And so I said all that to say like I definitely had an imagination that would take me outside of prison, but that wasn't a real relationship. It was just pie in the sky. And so I never heard anything from her. And yeah, my views and likes aren't necessarily the same as they once were for her, but she still is a great talent. And so I didn't want to have a relationship on the outside, but I felt like I need to write this woman back just to be nice because she was trying to be nice to me. And so wrote her back. I ended up getting a letter back. I wrote her, got another letter. And in the meantime, I called my friend that gave her my info and we talked and everything. And then I end up getting her number. And then I call her and then we would talk. And so at one point, like early on, like literally we got mail Monday through Friday, literally Monday through Friday for probably the first, maybe 2, 3, 4 months. I got like 2, 3, or 4 letters a day from her Monday through Friday. And so I'm not trying to make it seem like anything on her part because the letters I wrote back in turn, like I'd get 3, 4, maybe 5 letters in one day. I would sit on my bunk, man, like after chow at like 6 o'clock. I put my headphones on and put some Boys II Men or some Jodeci or something like that. Some Brian McKnight, just some R&B tunes, just to have some background music as I was thinking. And I write like a 15 or 20 page front and back letter back to address those little smaller letters I got. And so that kind of took me away, if you will, and took my mind to a different place that hadn't been in a while. And so we continued to write. And then one day she said, you know what? What do you think about me coming to visit? And I was like, wow, like, all right, that'll be cool. And so I sent her a visiting form and she had to send it back in and get approved and everything. And she did that. And we had the date set where she was going to come and I was all excited. And then I like called her the day before and she was like, oh man, you know what? Something came up and I can't make it. And yeah, I was disappointed, but I wasn't like mad or really upset. It was just like, okay, it'll be postponed. And so that was like it was a Thursday. It was actually a Thursday because I remember the next day, Friday, I went to work at Rec. I played some handball that morning, ran a couple miles, came in, took a shower. And I went out and played some basketball that afternoon. And when I came back in around 3 o'clock, I was literally in the shower and I had a big, like my hair was real long at the time. And so I was washing my hair and I remember them hear my name being called on the loudspeaker that I had a visit. And I'm like, I got a visit. Like my mother came once a month, like clockwork. It was rare, like maybe 1 month out of a year, she wouldn't make it for some reason, but then she'd double up another month. And so I'm like, I already had told like people that came and visit, which it was like only 3 or 4 people, like don't come unannounced because I could be doing something and then it may take me 30 minutes or an hour before I even get in the visiting room. And I didn't want them to have to wait. And I didn't want to miss that time spending them with my loved ones. And so I thought, okay, man, like it's probably my mama. And if she coming up unannounced, man, it's probably bad news. And so I was kind of like, I was like scared, I was wanting to get out the shower, get dry, get dressed and get to the visiting room real quick. But then I just wanted to go in my cell and shut the door and get under the covers and just be like, no, because I don't want the bad news. And so, of course, I went and I remember getting there. There was an officer that I used to interact with quite often out of recreation. And he was messing with me. He's like, man, you got some nice looking lady out there trying to visit you. And I'm like, huh? Like, come on, man, quit tripping. And he was like, no, for real, for real. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, man. And so literally like it still didn't click. It still didn't dawn on me like who it could be or who it was. Sure enough, I get in the visiting room. I look around, to see like who doesn't have somebody there. And I see this person sitting at a little 2-seater. It was like a little bitty table and they just put 2 chairs. If it was just one visitor. So I walked up there and I saw her, she saw me, and I shook her hand, and we sat down, and we was right in front of the officer's desk, which was okay. But I was like, what? And she was like, kind of like surprised. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm cool with surprises. Like, I really am. But it just kind of threw me. And so we sat there, and actually, I had put in some paperwork to make arrangements where she could come also and visit me twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. Now, you had to have really good conduct and you had to get approval for that. And I had submitted that paperwork and I never had gotten anything back. And it was kind of like if she gonna drive all the way from the Chicago area to out in the country in Missouri somewhere, just to visit one time for 3, 4 hours, like it really ain't worth just that trip to me. And so I hadn't got anything back. And so the sergeant that was at the desk, we was cool. We was real cool. And so I was like, hey Sarge, man, check this out. And so I told him the situation. And he was like, I go check, because sometimes they'll post stuff in the caseworker office in the window, and we don't get a chance to get it yet. I didn't get a chance to look when I came from the housing unit. Because if there was no approval, it really didn't make no sense for her to be prepared to come back the next day. So she could have maybe headed back home after she left or whatever. And so I remember when I went to the visit room, it was still a little light outside, and but it was starting to mist a little bit. And so I don't know, maybe 30 minutes had passed. Next thing I know, here come the sergeant, drenched. I'm like he jumped in a swimming pool or something. I mean, he was drenched with water. And he came back and he was like, you know what? I ain't seen anything in the caseworker office. I looked in our computer system. I didn't see anything. And he was like, you know what? I'm sorry. And I was like, man, I was like, all right, that's cool. I said, man, look, I really appreciate you. Like, he went all the way to extra, extra, extra mile. And to me, that's the favor of God. Like God has saw me doing the best I could to be obedient to him and to live the life he wanted me to live. And people see us in our lives. And there's a saying that says, be preaching the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Now, I'm not an advocate of that saying, because I think preaching is something that's audible, that comes from a person's mouth, and that you can't preach the gospel with body language and actions. But the idea, I think, is pretty solid. It's that we should let our walk match our talk. In other words, what we say out our mouth, our body language and our actions should demonstrate that. And so because I was trying my best to demonstrate that, people saw that and they decided that, you know what, this ain't really a bad dude. And this particular guy, he felt like he wanted to try to help me. And so I was very appreciative of that, but disappointed nonetheless. And so we visited, talked a little bit, and I don't know how much time passed, but he ended up coming back and he said, you know what, Mr. Dooley? He said, I got you. I already put it in the computer and you good to go to get all the visits this coming weekend. And I was like, wow, like, man, like not only did this dude go out in the torrential downpour to check on something for some no good inmate that's a criminal that shouldn't be never let out, but he even did something even nicer, man, by go ahead and putting that in the system for us to be able to visit. And so, man, I was very thankful for that. And so we continued our visit, left. She came back twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday, and then she left and went back home. And, we just became really good friends over the years. And basically, as we continue to write and talk and visit periodically, I started having feelings for her and she started having feelings for me. And when I felt that, I told her, I said, look, you know what? I got love for you. I love you, but I'm never getting out of prison. And whenever I feel like it's to the point to where like we feel a stronger like love towards one another, I love you enough to let you go. I love you enough to let you go, meaning I don't want to have a relationship or a marriage or any type of thing like that with me on the inside and her on the outside. And she had a young son, like maybe, 8, 9, 10 years old at the time. And I definitely wasn't trying to like take her away from him. I also felt like, his father was in his life, but if there would be another person that she would meet that would be a good father figure and role model for him, that I couldn't be that from where I was at. And so, I loved her enough to where I said, you know what, I'll let you go because I don't want to tie you down like that. Because I saw people do that so much in relationships and it just would take them down through there, man. And so I didn't want to be another one of them statistics. And so she said, you know what? We'll deal with that situation if and when it comes. And I was like, deal. Like, that's cool. I'm down with that. And so I just continued doing my time. And one day, all of a sudden, I got a letter in the mail from the parole board. And the letter said that it scheduled me for a parole hearing. And it was like maybe a couple of months down the road. And I was like, huh? Like, this weird, like, I got all these life sentences plus 100 years, and they talking about come to a parole hearing. So I'm thinking, you know what? It must be a mistake. But I'm not gonna like challenge them or try to push it away. Like, I'm going. And the cool thing was, probably for the prior 2 years before then, there was a volunteer that used to come in that was with the Salvation Army, and he was on the parole board in the state of Ohio for like 40 years or something crazy like that. And he used to come in to teach people and prepare them how to go before the parole board. I hadn't missed a class. It was like once a week. I didn't miss one because I was like, you know what? I want to be prepared. I'm that type of person that I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And so I had been prepping and learning all the right way to sit down, the right way to shake hands, make eye language, eye contact, the body language, the posture, the tone of voice. Like I was learning all that stuff. And it wasn't that I was trying to learn it so I would be just lying and faking it, but I wanted to, as much as I could, be prepared because I knew if I would ever get a shot, I didn't want to mess it up. And so sure enough, that time was coming and I was really nervous. And my time came. I went to the parole board and boom, I get inside and it was like 20 names of people that they called. And I was the first one through the door. I'm like, I'm going to get my answer. I know that they're going to give me a 5-year setback. And that was kind of like the way the Missouri Department of Corrections did. When you went to the parole board, they would give you like a 2-year setback, a 3-year setback, or a 5-year setback. That was pretty standard, meaning that you'd have to go do 2, 3, or 5 more years, and either they would let you out or you would come back and then have another hearing. And that was most of the case, because if they was going to let you out, it would just be a 2, 3, or 5-year out date. And so my thing was, okay, God, if I was going to play the genie in the bottle with you, you know, like if I had a bottle and there was a genie and I rubbed it and the genie came out and said, you get one wish, what would it be? You know what? I thought, man, if I could only do 20 years, if I could only do 20. Now, when I hear myself say that now, only do 20 years, I'm 46 right now. So that's a little less than half of my total age of how long I've been alive. That's a long time, 20 years. But I was thinking, man, if I got out after 20 years and that was all they would like make me do on this long, lengthy sentence, man, how could I even fix my mouth and say, God, I want to go to the parole board and they say we're going to let you out today. Like, that's really the genie in the bottle. But I thought, you know what? How can I fix my mouth to ask for like the greatest thing ever? Because I don't deserve to be out. I did not deserve to be out for the things I did that I got caught for and the things I did that I didn't get caught for. Did not, and still to this day, do not deserve to be out of prison. But, you know, I'm not in control of that. You know, God was in control of that. And so I get in there, first person, they tell me have a seat. And so all these other people, one by one, you know, was coming in there and going in the room with a guy. And then a couple minutes later, they come out and they leave. And I'm thinking, damn, I'm getting kind of antsy. I got a Set Free Ministries meeting that I got to go to at 1 o'clock. I'm looking at my watch like, man, I wish they hurry up. I got something to do. I was in a card game of Pinochle, and I was in the middle of the hand at that time, and I was waiting to go get in the shower to get ready for my meeting. So I'm like, come on with this. I know ain't nothing good finna happen. So come on, let me get up out of here. Give me my little rubber stamp me and get me out of there. And so finally, they like almost all the like literally 20 people that called now, like person 15, 16, 17. And I'm like, man, I'm getting kind of irate. And so this one caseworker lady comes up and she's like, how you doing, Mr. Dooley? What's going on today? Can I help you with something? I was like, well, they called my name on the loudspeaker to go up for parole. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, what's going on here. And so she was like, all right, let me check into it. And so, you know, I got a chance to go ahead and go up there. Like I said, it was people that went in there ahead of me. And I figured, you know, mine is going to be really, really quick because like they're not going to do nothing for me. And also what I had learned in my class was that they going to talk crazy to you. Like they gonna tell you no good, you know you did what you did. Don't try to act like you didn't do it. And I wasn't gonna act like that anyway, but it was like they gonna talk real crazy to you. And so I go into the room and they allowed one person to be there in the room. And of course, my mother, right? That there ain't no way she would let me have anybody else go there. And there's nobody else on the face of the planet that I would have had be there other than my mother. And so I sat there. It was like three people there, like they told me. One person just watching, one person like writing, and one person like asking the questions and stuff like that. And so I sit there and they said, "How you doing?" I said, I'm good. How are you?" And I sat down when they told me I could, and really it went nothing like I expected. As a matter of fact, it was totally different than what anybody that had ever been to parole, even that parole guy from the Salvation Army, different than everybody said. For instance, basically they only kind of said a couple things. They said state your name, your age, your date of birth, and that was all like for their records in the video and whatnot. And so the guy said, "You know what? It seems like you were just kind of hanging out with the wrong crowd." And I was like, well, I'm definitely not gonna say no. I was hanging out with a bunch of choir boys, so I was like, "Yes, sir." Like, yeah, and I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, but it wasn't like I was right. I was one of the wrong people in the crowd too. So I was like, "Yes, sir." Like I'm agreeing. That's my posture. And then he said, "You know what? It don't really seem like you really that bad a guy." And I'm like, "Huh? Like what? Like what this dude mean? Like I don't seem like I'm that bad a guy. Like is this a trick? Like am I being punked or something? Like what the heck is this?" And I was just like, "Yes, sir." I'm just agreeing with him. I'm not saying nothing. And he was like, "All right, thank you very much. You will hear back from us." And so I get up, give my mother a hug, and I leave. And as I walk back to the housing unit, that's when it dawned on me. Man, these people ain't letting me go. They not getting ready to do nothing for me. So why waste their time? I mean, they don't care about wasting my time, but why would they waste their time grilling me about all kind of crazy stuff when there ain't no idea in their mind they're gonna let me go? And I was like, yep, that makes sense. So I go back, I'm just doing my thing. And 6 weeks pass, and all of a sudden I get another loudspeaker call, right? And they're saying, "Come to the caseworker's office to get your answer." So I'm like, all right. So I go there and I'm playing the waiting game again. And they was waiting on one last person to come this time. And he wasn't getting there. And so they was like, "All right, well, come on in the room." So I go in the room and the dude like read my name, my inmate ID number 506-974. And he started reading from this piece of paper, and he was like, "Scheduled for release 2009." And this was 2007 at the time. And I just broke down in tears and I said, "Thank you, Jesus." Like, I don't know what the heck. Like, man, I didn't know what the heck that really just happened. And so when he handed me my paper, just that quick for me grabbing the paper, I thought they still waiting on another dude. So maybe they had his paper on top of my paper, but maybe it was slid down a little bit because the top was my name and my number. So maybe he was holding both pieces of paper together and he read my name and number. And as he scanned down, that's when it went to the other dude's paper. Like, I don't know. This just didn't make no sense. So when I got the paper, I was kind of going like this to make sure it was like one sheet. And it was. And I like sped read the heck out that thing real quick. And everything he read was right there in black and white. And I was like, wow. And so I come out of the office and it was like all the caseworkers was right there. Like it was weird, man. It was really surreal. And typically what happens is when you get a date back then, because I was a level 5, which is maximum security, because I got a date to get out, that dropped me down to like minimum security, which meant I couldn't be around those same guys anymore because if something happened to me, I could sue the state because I wasn't supposed to be around maximum security guys just in that instant. And so there was a sergeant there to escort me to segregation because that's what they did, which they put you in the hole until you got rolled out. And so he escorted me to ASSEG, and I was just like, wow, I mean, this was like a dream. And so I got the ASSEG and stayed there a couple of weeks until it was time for me to transition to another prison. And man, God is good. God is really good. And so, I got really comfortable right where I was at. I mean, I really did. And Now I knew I was going to a whole nother prison. I had only been to that only one I was in, Potosi Correctional Center at that time. And I had gained a rapport with a lot of people, a comfortability level where like I knew how the things ran, and I knew a lot of staff. I knew a lot of prisoners, and I kind of carved out a nice little niche for myself, if you will. I had a life and a lifestyle that suited me just fine, considering where I was at. But now I was going to be going to another prison, and I didn't know what was in store for me. And so a lot of those same nerves that I had when I first got to prison, those things start coming back up again, and the stomach getting a little tight and the heart pounding a little bit more, because I'm thinking, man, what's going to happen now? I got 2.5 more years to do, and I got to start from scratch all over again. What's this prison going to look like? What are these people going to look like? And better yet, am I going to survive? Just because I had survived these 13 years pretty much unscathed, could I survive the last 2.5? Well, if you want to know how I survived the next 2.5, tune in next week for episode 6 of my story, A Life of Redemption. Or, I'm sorry, my life, A Story of Redemption. Peace, y'all.